Hello, everybody, and welcome to Korn Ferry Live. Thank you for joining us again for what I hope is going to be a great session today. As you all know by now, our aim is to pick a topic that's in the news or maybe a theme we know you're battling with right now. Well, not quite today. Today's going to be slightly different. But as I beg of you every time, we still need you to get involved. Maybe you agree with what you're hearing, or maybe you don't. That's okay, but I want to hear from you. I want you to challenge our guests. Let's keep them on the edge of their seats. So put your questions in the chat and I'll put those to our experts. As you hopefully know by now, I'm your host, Darren Bolton, Chief Creative Officer here at Korn Ferry, and today I'm joined by two guests. First up, Jane Stevenson, Vice Chair of our Board and CE Services. And alongside her today, we also have Mark Rule, Senior Client Partner with Korn Ferry Digital. Jane is a thought leader on governance and innovation. She appears regularly in global business media, including Business Week, Fortune, Bloomberg, Reuters, and the Wall Street Journal. Jane is also a featured speaker at private forums for Fortune 500 clients and led an innovative research program with the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 by 25 program, geared to advancing 100 women to Fortune 500 CEO roles by 2025. And Mark is an employee engagement specialist, working with clients to relate employee engagement metrics to individual and organizational performance, and structuring work environments to translate high levels of employee motivation into improved results. He plays a leading role in directing Korn Ferry's annual research with Fortune magazine to determine the world's most admired companies since its definitive benchmark on corporate reputation began over 25 years ago. So if he's not the person we need for this topic today, I don't know who is. Well, that was an intro and a half, so I'll take a quick breath. As you might have all guessed by now, we'll be introducing the world's most admired companies of 2024. We'll be looking at which organizations have the strongest and why. If you think about it, in today's ever-changing business landscape, the ability to uphold a strong reputation is a testament to an organization's strategic acumen and adept management. So today we want to dig into what it takes to make it on that list. Who's gone up this year and who always seems to be hogging the limelight year after year? The rankings are hot off the press, having just been released this week. And we're putting a link in the chat during our discussion. Don't forget, get involved. The earlier you get your question in, the more chance we have of asking it. So, Jane, Mark, welcome to Korn Ferry Live.
Thank you, Darren. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you both here. Now, I'm sure our viewers will be desperate to see those rankings, but we're going to tease them a little longer. So to start with, I'd like us to cover a bit of background first. So let's kick off with you, Mark. Why should our viewers even care about who's topped the list?
A reasonable place to start, right? One answer is to note that this study has been running as the America's Most Admired Companies list initially since the mid-1980s and was taken global in partnership with Fortune in 1997. And I think the longevity of the study attests to widespread interest. I mean, you can think it's like a classic rock band, still touring, still releasing new material, still drawing crowds. But I think that interest comes for a lot of good reasons. Reputation is a key corporate asset, clearly, that influences a lot of outcomes. It influences an organization's ability to attract and retain talent. It influences how investors view organizations. It influences customer choices and behavior. And the last point I'd make is we've also seen, as we've tracked over the years, performance of the world's most admired companies against market benchmarks, that these companies are not only highly regarded, they're also highly successful. So there are a lot of lessons we can learn from them.
Okay, great. And Jane, why does a strong corporate reputation really matter?
Well, there are so many reasons why it matters, but I like to think of this as a sort of a corporate 360. And when you think about the world's most admired companies, this is how people see them. And so it gives an organization a report card on a number of measures of their quality of leadership, their products and services, whether they're perceived to be financially sound, all those different measures that you would want to know. And whether you think they're right or not, it's good to understand that this is the way you're perceived at the moment.
Sure. And Mark, maybe you can go into that a little bit more on how organizations are scored and ranked.
Yeah, that's also appropriate. There are many corporate rankings, and let's be clear on what we're doing with the most admired company study. First, the eligible companies. The eligible companies are Fortune 1000, Global 500 companies, so essentially the largest players in our industry space. There were 660 companies we evaluated as part of this year's process, spanning across 29 different countries in terms of headquarter locations. Who provides the feedback? It comes from senior executives and directors who are associated with the participating companies, largely up to 10 senior executives invited to provide feedback, up to 7 board members from each eligible company. There are also some input that we gather from industry analysts, but the overwhelming view is coming from executives and directors associated with the company. So you can think of the most admired companies rankings as a result, as a peer review of corporate reputation. The feedback then generates 2 sets of rankings. First, an all-star list, which we'll be talking about today, which companies are held in the highest regard across industries, a top 50 list of most admired companies globally. The study also generates a series of industry rankings, 50 plus, that have executives and directors associated with different industries evaluating other companies in the industry space across a more detailed set of reputational attributes. There are 9 attributes of reputation that we focus on that span from quality of products and services, quality of management, financial soundness, effectiveness in doing business globally, innovativeness. And the summary picture that emerges within the industry rankings is an average across what the participating raters have to say about a company on each of those different attributes of reputation. So that's a little background and context on what we're doing and how we do it.
And I suppose the big question, of course, and that everyone's after is who made the list this year?
Yeah, well, we can start perhaps at the top of the list, and I'll give you a sense of some of the stalwarts that we see continuing at the top of the list, and let Jane comment as well. So, for the 17th straight year, Apple finished first in that top 50 list as the world's most admired company. And for the 5th year in a row, Amazon and Microsoft round out the top 3. So we've seen a good bit of stability at the top of the list. And as Fortune noted in the release of the world's most admired companies rankings this week, big tech companies were once the disruptors at the edges of the global economy. Now they're the engines at its center. And you really see that reflected in the top 10, which also includes Alphabet at number 7. So there is a heavy tech influence. In terms of other stalwarts, though, Walmart, for instance, a company that's been a part of the top 50 list consistently, reemerged in the top 10 this year, coming in at number 9 for the first time in 14 years. So it's not only tech players, but there is a heavy tech emphasis right now in the top 10. But Jane, additional perspectives from you.
Yeah, it's interesting because with the exception of one, which I'm sure we'll cover in a little bit, in the top 10 list, there's a lot of consistency. And when you look at these organizations, and we're talking about Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, J.P. Morgan Chase, Costco, Alphabet, American Express, and Walmart, and we'll leave that 10th till a little later. But there are a lot of common things that you can see across those companies, even though they're really very diverse. And a couple that I note is these are trusted brands for multiple years. So they're not largely flash in the pans. They're perceived to be very value-based, and they bring clear perspectives on what they stand for. I think the level of trust is very high for all of them, but their performance as financial players is really reliable. So people look at them as an organization that's not likely to have a sharp turn. So when you think in terms of executives picking where you're going to work, et cetera, there's a stability that's associated with them. And they're not just strong performers. And I think this is a really important one. They're also transformers. So their ability to stay relevant, and you think in terms of Apple and all those years, and they're still viewed right at the front of the pack. And if you went through that whole list, you can probably think of similar corollaries around that. So they are constantly in a transformational mode. And it's interesting, a number of them, in fact, Mark and I were joking about Costco. And, if you want to think about quality, if Costco's carrying it, it's largely going to be pretty good. So those are some of the things that we noted about 9 of the top 10.
Yeah. That's great. And when we look at sort of like maybe the top 50, anyone in there that we're not really surprised to see over and over again, because it's been a lot of external fluctuations and pressures recent times and stuff. So I just wonder who are the ones that are still managing to stay up there, stay amongst the top ones.
Yeah, I think the consistency again is at the top of the list. There's a lot of movement within the list generally, as we'll discuss, but there's a lot of consistency at the top. So some of the names that we've listed: Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Berkshire Hathaway, as companies that really have been mainstays in the most admired companies rankings. And I think in addition to the strong reputations they have this year, we can take lessons from the fact that they've been over many periods of disruption and change, been able to maintain that high reputational profile. So I think there is a lot of consistency at the top, and we've seen that carry through year after year, often in the most admired company rankings.
Great. Just a reminder to all of our guests out there, please get your questions in. Don't make me beg now. It's not a pretty sight, trust me. So get them in. I can see a few coming in. I keep looking down, seeing the questions. So there are a few coming in. I'll ask them in a minute. But keep them coming, please. One more for you, Mark. Mark, you've worked on this project for kind of many years now. Did anything surprise you this year? Were there any big jumpers or maybe surprise fallers out of that top 50 maybe?
Yeah, we can talk now. We talked about stability. Let's talk about some of the movement in the rankings. Definitely there were some notable jumps this year. NVIDIA, one of the biggest movers. And I think the company Jane was holding off on mentioning, number 45 last year in the All-Star list, all the way up to number 10 this year, cracking the top 10. We'll have some comments perhaps on what may have driven that. Toyota Motor, another big mover, number 36 last year, up to number 25. Visa, last year, number 47, jumping up to 38. Also, a number of new entrants into the top 50 list, companies that didn't appear in last year's top 50 list that do this year. Eli Lilly won, coming in at number 34 this year, also assuming the top spot as the most admired company in the pharmaceutical industry, displacing J&J as a long-running number one, and joining Eli Lilly as a new entrant, Moderna, coming in at number 37, giving the pharmaceutical industry overall very solid representation in the top 50. 4 of the top 50 companies are from the pharmaceutical sector: Eli Lilly, Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J. Pfizer coming in at number 20, J&J at number 27. Also, new entrants are making an emergence into the top 50 this year. MasterCard coming in at number 40, L'Oreal coming in at 43, Adobe coming in at 46. So we've definitely seen some jumps. We've also seen some companies coming into the top 50 that weren't on the list last year.
Okay, great. And Jane, I don't know if you want to follow on from that. Did these brands do anything different or unique? And maybe were there any categories that had the biggest impact on them and their results?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about NVIDIA. I think what's fascinating, it's the only chip maker on the list. And when you think about how relevant technology is in today's consumer market and in the world at large, they seem to have really created a strong relevance that had them jumping from off the list to the top 10. And I think the other thing that we see is there's so much convergence between different industry sets. And so the ways that companies are being viewed, I mean, there's a lot of, we think of IT technology, but I think the story in the pharma realm where we've got new entrants is also about technology, a different type of technology, and the ways that we're really moving forward to have an impact on I think one of the benefits of COVID, there are a lot of downsides, but one of the benefits is that I think we're all a lot more practical. And when you look at the perception list, the organizations that are dealing with practical applications and the ways that people are living their lives are doing better.
Yeah, sure. I think we have a question ready to get on the screen. So I don't know if someone wants to put it on the screen for me. It's always very exciting. I never see it till the last minute. Here we go. So the question to Jane and Mark: what were the top 5 metrics to make it at the top of the list of most admired companies? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, two answers to that question. I can take it from a methodology standpoint. In terms of the top 50 list, the top 50 list is based on a summary judgment that the raters provide. We ask them to identify the companies they most admire across industries. The top 50 list is made up of the companies that are most frequently cited by the executives and directors who participate. However, as we turn to the industry rankings and we compare what feedback these companies gained from the industry rankings of the different attributes of reputation, I can tell you that the three really highest scoring attributes where the most admired companies most shine: quality of products and services, quality of management, and perceived financial soundness. So we've seen year over year, as we ask the most admired company participants directly, what do you think is the biggest driver of a company's overall reputation? What executives and directors who participate say is it's quality of products and services and quality of management. And that's reflected in where they most shine as you look across the different attributes of reputation. And I think that's a forward-looking view of reputation. You want to know where a company is right now. You can look at its financials. You want to know where it will be often. Look at the quality of its products and services and the quality of its people. And I think that view is reflected both in the rankings and in the perspectives people share.
Great. Jane, anything to add?
Well, I just think the soundness of the study is a lot based on the range of factors that relate to the reputation, to perception of trust, reliability, et cetera. So, there's a nice balance as you look at those metrics. There's a nice balance between the financial performance and the values that are perceived of the leaders, and of the quality of the company and of the ability to trust. So that's a really interesting mix. And sometimes we think in terms of a capitalist world being only financially driven. I think that this really looks at a very well-rounded measure of performance.
Great. We have a second question coming in. This is getting our audience going today. So I don't know if you want to get that good. Brilliant. Very slick. Do you see a clear blueprint pattern for a jump of these companies? Is there a playbook? Who wants to
Jane, do you want to first pass for that one?
Well, I'll give a first pass, but I think, Mark has such depth of insight on this. But I do think what's interesting is that, this is not a flash in the pan. And I think sometimes we live in an environment where it's perceived that you can sort of hoodwink to the top. And I think what we see here is a clear pattern of consistent value creation from a financial perspective, but also values. And where we saw a number of organizations that went down in their ratings, there were trust eroding events in most cases that really contributed to a different view of them. And that is, a lot of impact. So what's great is thinking in terms of the pattern. I think the pattern is consistency of who you have at the top, what that cultural fit looks like, what those values look like, coupled with that very strong financial performance that enables you to build trust on multiple levels in a geopolitical environment.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I mean, as we've looked at the moves that companies have made this year, some of the movers and shakers that we've cited, different factors may be at play in terms of how reputations are perceived. Some have jumped due to enhancement and perceived effectiveness in doing business globally. Others being seen as more innovative or having improved financial metrics. I think Jane's points are spot on, though, in terms of what we've learned and what we can take away in terms of the management of reputation. It's more about what a company does than what it says or projects. Most admired companies will say, therefore, responsibility lies with people, senior execs, employees, board members, more than any functional group, creating a real opportunity to reinforce that accountability across the organization. And I think that becomes more important in today's digital world, as Jane indicated, creating that culture of trust and ethical standards, because reputation is fragile. A lot of dynamics can very quickly affect a company's reputation if companies aren't diligent. So those are just some broader lessons in terms of how most admired companies think about and manage reputation.
Here's one other thing, just to be a little provocative, because the perceived stability of the pipeline of leaders in the organization is really equivalent to the caliber and the quality of the CEO. And so we saw a couple organizations where there was a marked shift, and you could almost directly correlate that to a perception of, a lot of changes at the top, which is inferring a level of instability that people pick up on. So, if you don't think talent matters and that leadership matters beyond one individual to a top team, I think this really makes that point.
Great. Okay. And I think we've got another question. So I don't know if you want to get that on screen. Great. Thank you. From Kathy. Which companies do you think we may see in the top 50 for the first time next year? Anyone you have your eye on? Who wants that one?
Well, I'll offer one. Jane mentioned that NVIDIA, moving into the top 10, is the lone semiconductor company that made it into the top 50 this year. With all of the focus on AI applications and the emphasis that puts on the companies that manufacture the chips that support, it will be interesting to see if we see more semiconductor companies follow NVIDIA into the top 50. So that's one sector I would have my eye on in terms of what we may see in the future.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting. I don't have a single prediction, but I think it will be very interesting to see if some of the unicorn companies end up showing up on the list now that they're, coming into their own a bit and have a little more stability. So it'll be interesting to watch that.
Yeah, great. Kind of building off of that, Mark, I was reading one of your articles on this online yesterday, sort of thing, and you said about there only being 5 new entries in the top 50. And I was wondering, is that due to the business environment? Is that a lack of ambition? Businesses playing safe? Does it say more about the top 50 or more about the ones trying to get into that top 50?
I think actually that level of movement in terms of companies falling off the list and coming on is fairly consistent with what we saw in 2023. In fact, I think there were 4 new entrants and 4 companies falling off in 2023. So that level of change in terms of companies making it onto the list and making their way off is probably fairly consistent. And I think we've seen across the list then patterns of stability, which you've highlighted, and also a lot of dynamic movement up and down the list, which is interesting to track year after year.
One of the things that can sometimes be a little frustrating with these types of tables is that it's great hearing what the best of the best are doing and their many achievements. But if it was that easy to just copy what they're doing, then we'd do it for 1,000 Tiger Woods or 1,000,000 Beyonce. So for everyone else that's there, not in the top 50 or the top 100 or even the 1,000, what can they take away from these findings? What can they learn?
Yeah, I'll take a first pass at that. I think there are some lessons that directly related to reputation and reputation management that organizations can take away, whether they're among the eligible participants, the 660 companies participating in this ranking study, or not. I think there's some lessons related to reputation, but also, we at Korn Ferry have done research year after year. Each year of our partnership now spanning over 25 years, taking a look behind the rankings and numbers. What are the practices and approaches that organizations are taking to different opportunities and challenges? And that's also a great resource for companies to learn from the practices of most admired companies. And again, practices that are applicable to organizations, not just Fortune 5 or Global 500, Fortune 1000 firms, but any firm that would like to draw insights in terms of what contributes to the strong reputation and performance of most admired companies.
Great, lovely. That's fantastic. We've pretty much run out of time. These things fly by, so I'm really sorry about that. But it's great as well because the energy has been fantastic. And thanks for all the questions. But are there, before we say goodbye, any final thoughts? What should leaders be thinking about? Any actionable takeaways? Jane, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I think there are a couple of key takeaways. And first of all, that consistent quality of performance matters. I think that's just such a strong theme in this. And that values are perceived and values matter as well as financial performance mattering. And then last, I would say, as you think about your own leadership, how relevant are you? Are you constantly reinventing and transforming at the same time as you're consistently providing that operational result? Those would be the themes from my perspective.
Okay. And Mark, to finish off.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief, and would just amplify what Jane has said. I think reputation is a very important corporate asset. Most admired companies take it very seriously, and that responsibility extends to senior levels in the organization. And they're very diligent about extending that focus on reputation across the organization.
That's great. Great. Well, we're going to have to wrap up there. We're so lucky to have two big hitters like yourselves here. So thank you, Jane. Thank you, Mark. That was absolutely great. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Take care. And once again, thanks to all of you out there for watching. As always, more insights on this and other topics, please visit kornferry.com. In case you missed it earlier, check out the chat for the link for this year's World's Most Admired Company winners. And don't forget to pre-register for our up-and-coming webinar on the growth secrets of the world's most admired companies and be the first to hear about the findings and what plans our most admired companies have for continued growth over the next 2 to 3 years. How are they going to do it? What strategies are they focused on? You'll find a link in the chat for that also. But that is it for now. We are back in a couple of weeks, I believe. So stay tuned. Have a fabulous weekend and goodbye.